Hey, there we go. Okay. It's just me in here. Awesome. Okay. Sorry about the bumpy start, but we are officially live. It took a second to get everything figured out. But can you hear me? Looks like we've only got a couple people in here. But hello. Welcome to the stream. Yeah. So I tried to do this with the other computer. Didn't work. So I had to pivot and use another one. That's okay. These things happen sometimes. Just like I tell my students at school, because I teach. It's my other job. Besides making YouTube videos, and something goes wrong, like if you are trying to turn something in and it doesn't work, then don't freak out. There's probably another solution. But yeah, welcome. We're here 10 minutes late, but we're here. So thank you guys for coming and being a part of the stream. Let's go ahead and get to some questions. I had a few people send in questions beforehand just to make sure not everybody can make it on Sunday night at 7, even though that was what we voted on. But again, not everybody voted, so it's okay. We just figured out. But yeah, just to make sure that everybody who wanted to get their question in could. So made sure I did that. I'm also playing MLB The Show while we're doing this, just to kind of keep myself focused and cut down on the nerves a little bit. But yeah, by the way, I if y'all don't know, this is me. This is what I look like. Welcome to my house in suburban Greenville, South Carolina. Yeah, so actually, before we get to questions, and if at any point you do want to ask a question, please do. I want to talk about the World Cup because that was a thing that happened. Actually, let me check these mic settings real quick. Just make sure everything is working like it's supposed to. Which again, I did all this on the other computer, but okay, there we go. I'll probably turn myself up a little bit. Let's see. Hello? Y'all hear me okay? Awesome. Yeah, so I gotta talk about the World Cup because that was wild. That was honestly like one of the coolest sporting events I've ever been a part of. Like getting to watch that was absolutely insane. I watched it in my living room with my wife. I watched every second of it, which was incredible. Where and what do you teach? Good question. I am a psychology teacher. So you guys will, if you've been with us from the beginning, you'll know that there's like a smattering of psychological topics that we go over on the channel. Not every video gets that treatment, but a lot of them do. But yeah, I teach general psychology, which is kind of it's a 201 overview course. So you start with like, here are the founders of psychology, like Wilhelm Wundt and Max Wertheimer and all of these really old dead white guys. And then you get to Freud and do like the Rosenhan experiment. And this is, may or may not mean anything to you, but yeah, it's just kind of a general overview course. Talk about how the brain works, talk about neurotransmitters, all that kind of thing. But yeah, it is. I teach psychology. I've taught that. I've taught some abnormal psych, which is like psychological disorders. And I teach at Greenville Tech, which is the big technical school here in Greenville. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. When I'm not making and editing YouTube videos, that's what I'm doing, is molding young minds. We are off now, which is awesome. I had my last exams turned in a few days ago. So I'm officially on winter break, got all my grades turned in, which is always a little hectic there at the end. Just to make sure that I have, if I have 50 papers to grade, that I've done my due diligence there and I can submit everything. So it gets very busy there. And then all of a sudden now it's like not busy at all. I guess I'm not going to class. I'm not teaching anything virtually. Just kind of got a little bit of a break until the beginning of January. Do you think the Broncos can turn it around next year? I wish I had better news on that front. Because, and let me actually look this up. This is the benefit of doing this while I have my computer handy, is what did they trade for Russell Wilson? Because that's going to Broncos Russell Wilson trade. Because if it's like most trades for big quarterbacks, they've probably mortgaged, and I think they did mortgaged a pretty decent chunk of their future draft capital on this, and he also makes a lot of money. So the Broncos, I think, were definitely kind of doubling down on this working, and has not. So in terms of can they turn it around, probably not next year. Okay, here we go. What did they trade for him? I'm gonna guess, if I remember correctly, it was like multiple firsts. Okay, what did we give up here? Okay, Noah Fant, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris. That's not a whole lot. This is where it's going to get hard to hear if you're a Broncos fan. They traded their 2022 and 2023 firsts, their seconds in both of those years as well, and a fifth in 2022. So that is a lot of draft capital. And like, obviously the draft is not the only way to build a team, but if let's see if I can pull up their payroll structure. You're getting kind of a live look at how I do videos and just like how I answer questions in general. Let's see, what's the Broncos payroll structure like? Because I'm going to assume that, okay, here's our salary cap table. So I'm going to assume that Russell Wilson, being like previously an elite tier quarterback, is going to make a decent chunk of it. Let's see, looks like, this is from Spot Track. Yeah, his base salary doesn't look like it's that much. It looks like he'll get more in signing bonus and roster bonuses. Yikes. He's got a $17 million cap hit this year, leaving a room at that particular position. Justin Simmons is leading, according to this, but I don't feel like this is right. But yeah, long answer to short question. No, I don't think the Broncos will be able to turn it around in a year. I think this is going to be a multiple year rebuilding job, which I know is tough to hear. And it also kind of stinks because they've kind of been doing that for a while and accumulating talent for somebody like Russell Wilson to be able to throw and hand the ball to, which is kind of irrelevant now. You know, your Jerry Jeudy's and Cortland Sutton's et al. KJ Hamler. But yeah. What is my opinion on the Correa contract? So my opinion on this has been a little jaded by the events of the last 24 hours or so, because I am a huge Braves fan, which you guys are probably aware of, and watching Dansby Swanson leave, especially in the aftermath of Freddie Freeman doing the same a year ago, is hard. But like the shortstop market has been absolutely bonkers. You know, Trey Turner getting, I think it was like 200, 300 million. Correa getting something similar. It is a contract that I am glad that the Braves didn't take on, in a sense. But obviously, if you get Carlos Correa, that's a net positive in all likelihood. It's expensive, and I think it is definitely borne out by the fact that people knew the Giants had money, and they sort of showed their hand. And how they pursued Aaron Judge, didn't get him. They were after somebody. Rodon was another one. Like, people knew that they were looking to make a big splash in the free agent market. And so agents are aware of that kind of thing. And so they can go to a team and be like, charge a 5% Giants upcharge, basically. So my opinion is that they got an elite level shortstop, which is obviously good. That's what you want if you're any team. But just hoping that bat, and especially his ability in the field, persists. Because I think he's 30. Let me look this up. Carlos Correa. I think he might be 30 or 31. He's 28. And gotta go to Baseball Reference. Again, you're getting a kind of a live look into how I answer my own questions and make videos, which is like, this guy's a thing. Let's go find out stuff about him. And you can just use stats like this to assess general trends. Okay, so Carlos Correa over the last couple of years, playing in Houston and then in Minnesota. So he had OPS plus of 131 in 2021, 140 in 2022. So if you're not familiar with that particular statistic, that means that he was 40% better than a replacement player, which is good. You want that, especially from a shortstop. That's well above what you would expect from that particular position. Usually, the guys that you're going to count on to like be putting in most of your offense production are going to be like your first baseman, third baseman, corner outfielders, that kind of thing. So to be able to have that kind of output from your shortstop is huge. Let's look at his WAR rating. Okay, so WAR dropped off a little bit. I wouldn't worry about that too much. He was still a 5.5 WAR player last year, and so making $35 million last year to play in Minnesota for 1 year. But yeah, if you are a Giants fan, I would say be excited because Carlos Correa is really good, but just also be aware that it could deteriorate relatively quickly. Let's see what his full contract was. Carlos Correa contract. 13 years, $350 million. Okay. So he's going to be finishing up that contract when he's 41, if assuming he makes it all the way to the end as a Giant. Because I don't know who trades for that. But yeah, that's a lot of cheddar. And you're probably assuming that you're front loading his production onto like those first few years instead of, and it'll just equal out over time. But yeah, that's still $300 million for a shortstop is still a lot. $350 million for a shortstop even. And I would say the same thing about Trey Turner. The Phillies, spent a pretty similar amount of money, if not, almost exactly the same amount of money on Turner to make their already very long lineup even longer. And even though, he's an elite player, that's just a lot of money. I'm kind of coming at this from a Braves perspective, which is like, we can't afford that. That's not a thing that the Braves typically do. But yeah, I would say be excited, but also just sort of have that in the back of your head that it might go downhill after a certain period of time. Okay, this is from George. Okay, athletes obsess over their sport. They study, they work out. Do you think that obsession is mainly persuaded by money, or do you think that other professions can also commit to that level of dedication? So there's a couple of ways that I would answer that. I don't think that in most cases it's like exclusively or even predominantly motivated by money. But in some cases that, you observe like a guy like Dansby Swanson, for instance, who has like a breakout season in a contract year, like that can definitely impact your performance positively, knowing that, hey, if I, have a breakout season, and you may dedicate yourself that much more to, I have to have good numbers so that once I hit the free agent market, I can capitalize on that. And that is also why sometimes after a guy signs a big contract, you will see those numbers drop off because there isn't that same level of motivation to actually make that happen. And that makes sense psychologically. Like we've talked before about positive reinforcement and intermittent reinforcement schedules, and the idea that if you have some type of reward waiting for you at the end of something, you are going to be highly motivated to perform to get that reward. The question is, for some people, that's more intrinsic than others. So like today, for example, going back to the World Cup, like Argentina played like absolute maniacs for 65, 70 minutes. And they played like they were, and they are the best team in the world, but they were just like clearly the best team in the world, and that France didn't belong in the same field with them. And I'm just watching that thinking like they're not that much better than France. Like they look like men against boys right now. And I think a lot of that had to do with the motivation. Like Argentina, I don't want to use a cliche, but like, the way that has been translated is that they wanted it more. Like they had more incentive to increase their own work output to make something happen because they haven't won the World Cup in almost 40 years. There's been a lot of discussion about the, winning it for Messi and doing all this stuff to try and make sure that Messi's legacy is cemented. I think that's kind of nonsense, but because he was already an incredible player and was already, probably the GOAT even without winning the World Cup. But yeah, that's probably what I would say there. And do I think other professions can also commit to that level of dedication? I think a lot of people do. It's anybody that is at like the absolute highest level of whatever profession you're talking about. Like that's you have to sacrifice so much, not just time wise. You always hear that there's only 24 hours in the day for everybody. It's a cliche, but it's true. But what you also see is that you have limited cognitive resources available, and if you're willing to devote more cognitive resources to making something happen, rather than taking care of yourself, having a family, things like that. Yeah, like people already do commit to that level of dedication in other professions, and I think it's possible. I think it takes a lot of sacrifice and is really difficult, which is why not that many people can do it. But yeah, I think that's true of people that are elite at being business people or musicians or whatever else. Ryan G. Cook asks, will we ever see another multi-sport star like Bo Jackson in pro sports? What would your dream athlete sports swap, i.e. LeBron as a tight end, OBJ in soccer, be? I don't think we'll ever see exactly like Bo Jackson. So one of the reasons that made Bo Jackson so singular is that he was so good at both, so very obviously excellent. Even though his numbers in baseball weren't like light up the entire league type stuff, he would do things that you just be like, this person's not human. I don't understand how somebody can do that and with any level of consistency. But I don't think that that's as possible anymore, just because the quality of the average player in any given professional sports league has gone up so much, more so in the 1980s. I think it would be so difficult for anybody to be even below average at being an NFL player and a Major League Baseball player. That's just I don't think it would happen, honestly. I think the bar has been raised too much for somebody to have the same type of impact. I think somebody like Deion Sanders would be more realistic, or even Brian Jordan, because again, one of the things that made Bo Jackson so singular was his physical stature, and both of those guys were littler and played little guy positions, which I think helped, just because there wasn't as much taking hits, physical demand on them in a football sense. So, we're talking about two defensive backs, outfielders, rather than an outfielder running back whose job is to get hit pretty much every time they get the ball. So no, I don't think we'll have that same level of multi-sport quality, but I think there could be a person or people who do actually play multiple sports, if not simultaneously, over the course of their career. I think it's possible. Don't think it's super likely, but it could happen. My dream athlete sports swap, I think, would probably be somebody, because I like the OBJ idea, but I would switch it to somebody like Jalen Ramsey, some really elite defensive back, playing outside back, left back, right back, just because I think those physical qualities are so similar, but just the level of strength and speed that an NFL defensive back has, I don't know how that would translate to a Premier League type situation. I think it would be super fun to watch. So that would definitely be my, I think that would definitely be my dream athlete sports swap. And it doesn't have to be Jalen Ramsey. Just use that as a potential example because he's really good. Okay, let's do a question from the internet beforehand. Okay, this is from Daniel. What are your thoughts on the 12-team playoff and second, Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC? Okay. First thought on the 12-team playoff is that it's a terrible idea. I am not a huge fan of diluting the stakes of the regular season to that extent. And what makes me kind of insane about this sort of thing, and we saw something similar with FIFA recently, is that we skipped the 8 phase. Went straight from, it's 4, and I think it's good as 4, and I think 8 would have been maybe not as good, but still good. We skipped that. We're going 12 is the number that we seem to have landed on, which kind of drives me bonkers because I think 8 would have been just about like Goldilocks. I think like that would have been as close to like, there's still a very high level of teams. Because where would that get us now? Let's see. AP poll. So we'd still have our top four as it is. So Georgia 1, Michigan 2, TCU 3, Ohio State 4. But this would also get in Alabama, which I would obviously be for, Tennessee, Utah, and USC. And then Penn State 9 and 10. So like once we get down to like Utah and USC, I mean those were the teams in the Pac-12 title game. So like these are still really excellent teams. So like 8, I feel like conceivably we could see on their best night USC like at least give Georgia a game, if not beat them. Some people may disagree with that. That's fine. But I think once we get down to 12, which in this case would be Washington, Georgia, Washington, that we could like. It's possible that Georgia could lose, but like I think it's significantly more likely that they would absolutely pace Washington. And we'll have a question later on who I think the best team is in college football. It's Georgia. Georgia's really good. And then question on Oklahoma and Texas coming to the SEC. I am not a fan. First of all, because the name of the conference is the Southeastern Conference. And once we get out to Texas and Oklahoma, we are no longer in the Southeast. Very much South Central kind of territory. So that's my first beef with it. The other one is that I just don't know where they're going to fit in the like SEC hierarchy. Like I don't really know. Like I think Big 12 people might expect them to come in at the higher end. I think SEC people like me would probably estimate that lower. But again, like I don't, on like a year over year basis, I don't know how well they're going to actually like stack up. And there's no way to test that, unfortunately, until it actually happens, which it seems like it's going to. So do I think it's a good idea? No. But it'll be fun. And, those are two really good programs and teams in multiple different sports. So, yeah. Do you think the Pelicans have a shot at the championship? Yes. Yes, I do. Mostly because they have really good players. I think they absolutely have a shot at the championship. I think this is one of the more open NBA environments we've seen in a while. Warriors probably excluded. Let me just pull up these standings real quick, just because I'm anal and can't not do this. All right. Because, yeah, okay. So at this point, and again, we're 30 games into the season about? Yeah. And so the Pelicans are the 2 seed behind the Grizzlies. And like, if you were to ask me, like, could either one of those teams win? I would say yes. Like, absolutely, they could. Will they? I don't want to prognosticate that far into the future. I think the Bucks and the Celtics probably both beat them. But again, like, this is asking a lot of what is still a pretty young team. Like the core is not really tested in that environment yet. Really interesting though to look at the long-term effects of that Lakers trade, because obviously the Lakers won a chip, getting Anthony Davis, and so they can't complain too much. But now the Pelicans are probably more suited for long-term success because of that trade, and that usually is the way these things go. The team that gets the superstar wins more in the short term, and then teams that gives up mortgages their entire future to get said superstar or trades away their whole future is trading their whole future to somebody else who can then add it to what they already had, and so they have a lot more really good assets. And so I think that's what's happening there. All right, are the Sixers pretenders or contenders? That is a good question. I just, based on history, would probably say pretenders. Let me look this up. Music search. Yeah, I don't know. I like I said, I would probably say pretenders just off of first instinct, because there's like multiple teams in the East that are like pretty obviously better than them, in my opinion, which includes the Nets. Where the Nets, all of the dysfunction we've talked about, they like actually look decent, like, and they're gonna have to like actually beat these teams to get forward. But yeah, there's no reason they couldn't make it to a conference finals, but I think they probably get bounced in any type of actual like significant stakes situation. Yeah, just looking over their roster because I don't have all of them memorized. I wish I did. That would be nice. And again, they do have two like elite frontline players, which is going to make that all the easier when they actually get into those playoff situations. But yeah, I probably wouldn't bet significantly on the Sixers. Okay, let's do another question from the mailbag. Dun, dun. Okay, future of college football landscape with NIL and the portal. So this has gotten a lot of pub recently because there's just been a lot of Sturm and Drang about guys transferring. There's obviously been a lot of shift post NIL being instituted, which we all knew was going to happen. Like I think to me, I'm definitely not like I'm a lot calmer about this than I think a lot of people are. And like honestly, it's like my favorite team, which is Alabama, is affected as much, if not more, than just about any other team in the country. Like we just like shed players pretty much every year because guys, come to Alabama and don't get immediate playing time, and then they leave, and that's just kind of part of the deal. And sometimes they, even going back to like, I think about like Alvin Kamara was, a lot of people don't remember that, but he went to Alabama first before he transferred to Tennessee, and then got drafted by the Saints and became an All-Pro running back. But yeah, like I said, am not as pushing the panic button as a lot of other people are about this stuff. But I do think collective bargaining is probably in our short to midterm future, because I think the schools and then the sponsors themselves are just like not going to stand long term for the amount of fluidity and just like volatility that the current market has, which I'm fine with, honestly. Like I'm not, if we have to codify this thing to the point that like it dampens the student athlete's ability to earn a little bit, but like makes the people investing in them more comfortable doing it, I think that is a net positive for everyone going forward, because you will have more people willing to, bring those sponsorship deals forward, and people are still figuring out like what's actually reasonable. Would that eventually correct on its own? Probably, but I think it will take some actual like concrete rules being put in place for everybody to be happy going forward. Do you think the Dodgers 2020 ring counts? Yes. I think, and this is hard because not every team that won a title during that time won it like in the midst of it. So like, Liverpool won the Premier League that year, but they had already had 85% of their season done before any of the COVID lockdowns happened. So like, it's not quite the same. Like I think people would feel more comfortable being like, yeah, well, they were in first. They'd already played 22 games or whatever. They were like way out in front too. So like, it was pretty obvious that they were headed for that. Whereas, somebody like, the baseball played their entire season in that reality. NBA played their playoffs in a bubble. You got that Mickey Mouse ring conversation. Do I think Mickey Mouse rings exist? Not really. As much as I did enjoy Blooper trolling the Dodgers about it. Blooper is the Braves mascot, if you are not familiar. Tremendous Twitter follow if you're into that sort of thing. But yeah, I think their ring counts. What hurts is that had the Braves not blown a 3-1 lead, which I think they were perfectly capable of closing out, with a couple of bounces going differently. Mookie Betts not making like a superhuman catch, and Marcell Ozuna being better at base running. I think that, the Braves absolutely could have won that one series, which hurts, but then they won it the next year, so it was fine. But short answer to your question is yes, I do think the Dodgers ring counts. I think it's going to hurt if that's the only one that they win out of. Yeah, I think that's a good way to couch that a little bit. If that is, out of this like decade plus long run that the Dodgers are on currently, if that's the only ring they win out of that, I think that will, have them viewed differently in the long term. But yes, their ring does count. But I think you could subject that to the same sort of scrutiny that you would for any kind of ring. Which is, like think about the, Cavs losing to the Warriors the first time, but Kyrie and Kevin Love are both hurt. Like you have to factor in the context in all of these different situations. And I think that's fine. I don't really spend a ton of time like trying to figure out, I am pretty preoccupied with like legacies, but I don't really enjoy being like, okay, well, this person is better or this team is better than another one. Okay, if you haven't covered this already, we haven't. Who are your top 3 to 5 choices to replace Nick Saban? When do you think he retires, and when do you think he should retire? I think he should retire when he darn well pleases, as long as it's not absurd, which I know that's like kind of not an answer. But he can coach basically as long as he wants, but I don't think he's the type of person that will coach past his ability to. And I could be wrong about that. Like we could get into a Bobby Bowden situation where it's like, I wanted to keep going, but they pushed me out. I also cannot imagine a situation where the Alabama board pushes Nick Saban out unless something crazy happens. And something crazy does not include having a 2-loss season. It's like part of me is like, well, if we keep going on like we've been going, I'm like, it's not. The Alabama season was fine. This is not affecting, whether we want to have him specifically in the coach's seat going forward. Who I want to replace him is a little harder because that's like it like shifts all the time. Like that's the best way I can describe that. Is like, year to year, I was like, Mel Tucker, he seems pretty good. And then his, stars come off of him a little bit. Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker, Mario Cristobal, same kind of thing. Like, he's a good coach, doing good things, really good recruiter. I'm like, do I want him to replace Nick Saban? Not really. I think at this point, our best hope is that sometime in the intervening years, like a Lincoln Riley emerges. Not Lincoln Riley specifically, unless he wanted to come. That'd be okay. But I somebody like that, sort of a younger guy who's already done it somewhere else and would be willing to move. I think that would be really useful because at that point, Lincoln Riley's already got a couple of playoff appearances underneath him. He's shown his ability to develop quarterbacks like really well, which I think is like a really important thing. Can you develop the most important position on the field? Can you recruit? Those are like my 1-2 thing. Obviously because of where he's from, there's the Dabo Swinney connection. I don't really want that, partly because I live in Greenville, which is like hardcore Clemson country, and I don't know if I could emotionally handle that. Right now, I like D'Amico Ryans. I think that would be fun, but he's probably going to be an NFL head coach way before he is eligible for that sort of thing. That doesn't mean that in the future it couldn't happen. But again, I've never, I don't think he's ever coached, at least at that level in college. So I could be totally wrong about that. He could get hired as an NFL head coach and be a disaster. And then the same thing could happen in college. We have no idea. But sentimentally, I think D'Amico Ryans would be right up there. Other people, there's always like, before him getting hired at Florida, I would have said like Billy Napier would have been right up there. I would have said Bill Clark from UAB before he retired. There's always like the smaller school guys that do really well. Like the guy, I can't remember, I think it's Jamie Chadwell. I think it's the Coastal Carolina guy. Jamie Chadwell, another guy who's like inexplicably still at the school where he's done like really well. I don't get why no bigger program has been like, hey, you're pretty good. You're like you're winning a bunch of stuff at Coastal Carolina. But yeah, I would say D'Amico Ryans right this second would be number one, but not necessarily going to stay that way just because these things are very transient. When do I think Nick Saban retires? I'm going to just throw out a number and say 2026. I don't know. I do think we're going to be in for a lot of hurt when he actually does. And in the sense that a lot of people are not going to be able to manage their expectations once he finally quits and we're stuck with just a mere mortal to replace him. Okay. More or less confident about the Braves going into 2023. This is from Daniel. I would say about the same as where my confidence was last year, which is what I would describe as, what would be, what I would accept as like a successful season. And I would say NLCS plus. That seems like the most realistic thing to put it at. I don't think we're in World Series or bust territory. Like in my heart says that, like this is one of the best teams the Braves have ever had, and definitely still one of the best teams in the majors, and getting better. Like a lot of people have questioned the Sean Murphy trade and like what they gave up, and trading Contreras after he did nothing wrong. Like he was awesome, and just again seemed to be getting better all the time. But Sean Murphy's really good. So that's another. He's probably top 4 or 5 catcher in the entire league. So getting him, it's hard to be that upset about that. So where my expectations would be, division title, I think that is reasonable. Just barely squeeze that, but I actually think the Mets are going to take a step back this year. So I think it's going to be Braves and Phillies instead of Braves and Mets this time. I could be totally wrong about that, but that's just what I think. And so expectations about where they were last year, including the uncertainty element of, like Freddie Freeman leaving last year, to a lesser extent, Dansby Swanson leaving this year, but we still don't have a shortstop. So I don't know. We have no idea what's about to happen. Okay. Who is the best team in college football and why? I think Georgia is the best team in college football. I know that's not a super original answer, but I think it's the correct one. They're really good. They do a lot of what, and there's a reason for this, obviously, because they have the guy that was our defensive coordinator with Nick Saban for a long time. So they have pretty much replicated game plan wise the way that Alabama used to play, which has been described by me and others as joyless murder ball, where they basically just beat the crap out of people until they quit. I have referred to it in the past as boa constrictoring, which is basically just choking the other team out until they submit. It's not always super fun to watch. You can have Stetson Bennett or Greg McElroy run your offense and like have a lot of success, even though they're not going to like light up any scoreboards. One of the craziest stats I think I saw this whole like season, and Stetson Bennett gets invited to the Heisman ceremony, which was absurd. Because I think he threw like 16 touchdown passes before the SEC title game, and CJ Stroud, who was also in New York, threw that many in the first 4 weeks of the season. Like it wasn't even October and he already had 16 touchdown passes. But my point is that like the rest of the team around him is so good, and it's set up in such a way that they don't rely on him to be, like super elite. CJ Stroud, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young. Like they don't need him to do that. And that's kind of terrifying because they can just choke people out. And they can beat people up until they don't want to play anymore. And at the end of the game, they pretty much always win. They haven't really even really been tested that much. Like the game, pretty much every team like this is going to have one game where they don't play as well. And whether they lose that game or not, a lot of times determines whether they make the playoff or make it into the BCS title game or whatever. So think like Florida losing to Ole Miss. Georgia had that against Missouri because Georgia nearly lost to Missouri in a way that any of the other teams that they played that were actually really good, i.e. LSU, Tennessee, they couldn't really even lay a glove on them. But they still won. And that's the measure in my mind of can you do it when things aren't going well? And the answer in that case was yes. They were having all kinds of trouble getting things going, and they still managed to win. So to me, yes, Georgia is definitely the best team. I don't even know who I would actually put second. I think in my mind, it's definitely Georgia at the top, and then a pretty significant drop off, and then Michigan, and then another decent, not as big as the first drop off, but another drop off. Then TCU, and then Ohio State right behind them. I wasn't that impressed with Ohio State. The one, that's not the only good team they played, Michigan, but they got their butts kicked. They didn't even really come close in that game. And so, when I'm looking at, is this team playoff worthy? How are they going to do? I think there's a lot of value in looking at, okay, well, against playoff caliber teams, if there is sort of a proxy of, what would a playoff environment kind of look like? If there is that kind of data available, that can be very helpful. And we have that on Ohio State, and it wasn't good. They did not represent themselves particularly well at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get absolutely boat raced by Georgia. TCU and Michigan, I think, will probably be a little bit closer, but I think it's probably going to be Georgia, Michigan in the title game. A bit boring, but I think Georgia's probably going to win, and it's kind of going to make me want to throw up a little bit, but that is the way it be. Kirby Smart would also kind of be cool to have as our Nick Saban replacement, but I don't think he's going anywhere, and I'm not sure emotionally I'm ready to get back to the joyless murder ball. I didn't find much joy in it, shockingly. I didn't really start liking Alabama football until Edgy McCarron left, which sounds mean, but that was just not my favorite style of football to watch. Okay. Why did the Cowboys suck? They don't. They're 10-4. They didn't look good today. They lost to the Jaguars, which nobody ever wants to do. But I will say that the Jaguars are 6-8. That's a lot better than they've done in various other seasons recently. Trevor Lawrence, even if he doesn't necessarily look like he should have been the number 1 overall pick definitively, he's growing into his NFL career, which I think is a positive development. With the Cowboys specifically, and I do think they have underperformed their sort of expectations. They haven't lived up to what I feel like should be their standing in the NFL from year to year. Kind of have in my head okay, these are the kind of teams that you would expect to contend because of their market size, because of their ability to attract free agents, because of the personal investment from their ownership group, things like that. And I would definitely expect the Cowboys to be in that mix as well, but they haven't been. And anytime there's a common denominator in a situation like that, I feel like you have to take that into consideration. And with the Cowboys, it is Jerry Jones and sort of his network, the nuclear Joneses are the one that has stuck over time. And I know if there's any Cowboys people watching this, that he was also there when they won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s. But that was 30 years ago. So maybe hasn't adapted as well to the changing landscape as you might like to see. So that's where I would lay blame for sort of perennial underperformance the last 15 to 20 years. It's like anytime there's one person or a group of people that hasn't changed, like I feel like you have to look at that because they a lot of people said, oh well, Jason Garrett's the guy, Tony Romo's the guy. Well, they're both gone. And while the Cowboys have had spurts of success, including this one, they're not a bad team this year. Unfortunately, they're also in the division with probably the best team in the NFL currently, which would be the Eagles. It's just until that team gets sold, I'm not super sold on them being like consistently successful going forward. Okay. Is the current model of college football in an inevitable death spiral? It's from Adam. No. Like I said, I'm not as panicky about this kind of stuff as a lot of people are. I think it's going to look really different, and like some of the rules that have been established over the last like 50 or 60 years, like the SEC is the Southeastern Conference. The Pac-12 encompasses teams on the Pacific Coast, things like that. Like I think those could change, and that's based on like TV revenue, based on school size, things like that. It's not always going to make sense, and I think quite frequently going forward it won't make sense. It will defy a lot of the conventions that have been built up over like decades, but I think overall the product will still remain good and remain interesting and exciting. What I hope doesn't change is that, like one of my biggest complaints about the NFL is that in my mind, there's just not that much difference between like stylistically from team 1 to team 32. Like there's pretty much like an NFL standard of like, this is the way we do it in the league. And there are some teams that do it differently, but that's like rare. Like that's one of the reasons that like Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they stand out so much. It's like this is a team that chooses to do it differently, and it's really hard to stop because it's different than what a lot of people expect. But I hope that in college, where there is actual like legitimate innovation year over year, and people doing really interesting stuff, like I just don't know in the NFL would you've had like I can think about like at Nevada they just like invented the pistol offense, like it didn't exist, and then they were like, let's bring the quarterback closer to the center, but not have him under center. And I just like this, we can do that. Yeah, you can do that. People aren't really trying that in the NFL. Like sometimes the innovations make it up. Like, so you'll have like the Wildcat. Think about like Arkansas mid 2000s, Darren McFadden, that whole crew. Houston Nutt starting to do the Wildcat, and then all of a sudden the Miami Dolphins are doing the Wildcat. Like these are things that do happen. I may have had that backwards. I can't remember where the Wildcat originated from. But I know a lot of NFL teams started doing it, and I remember the Dolphins being one of them. I may have just accidentally credited Houston Nutt with inventing the Wildcat. Somebody can check me on that. But yeah, that's my hope, is that college football remains the haven of innovation that it has been, and that doesn't change as the landscape does and people start making more money and things like that. Okay, so that's all the questions that I have currently listed. If there's people still here in the chat, feel free over the next few minutes to ask more. I think we got 10 more planned minutes, but if y'all have more things you want to go over, by all means, and send them my way. But while y'all are thinking it over, I do want to talk about the World Cup, because I haven't been this excited about a sporting event in like a while. Like even I think about like the Braves playing in the World Series, that was divided into 6 games. And I think it was also just like so nervous the whole time that it wasn't as just like genuinely exciting as it probably should have been. Same thing with Alabama playing in a title game or in the playoff game or whatever. Like there's more like personal stakes, and there was in this case too. But It was more just like, this is going to be awesome. And it was awesome. Like, I, first of all, was like shocked by how well Argentina played initially. Like I said earlier, like, I knew Argentina were really good. I mean, I picked them to win the tournament before it started, partly for sentimental reasons, but also because they won the Copa America. Like, they have shown that they can, win international games consistently. But they're not that much better than France. France is like, they won the World Cup in 2018. They retained a lot of the core from that team and then added new people that are also incredible. So like Tchouaméni and Camavinga and several other big players that got minutes in that final were not there in 2018 and are getting big minutes at big clubs as well. So to watch Argentina, who are also have incredible players, but it's not quite the same. So like, whereas, France have Aurelien Tchouaméni, who got a transfer to Real Madrid for $100+ million over this past summer. Argentina have like Alexis McAllister and Rodrigo de Paul. They're like good players, but not $100 million players. And not every one of France's players are like that, but a lot of them are. Like, think about like Teo Hernandez as their left back. He's like one of the best left backs in the world. Upamecano and Varane are both incredibly expensive players. You know that because they've both transferred relatively recently. But yeah, Argentina were absolutely kicking their butts. Like, and it was, I was rooting for Argentina, so it was good to watch. But it was also just kind of bonkers. Like, looking at them systemically, like, how is this happening? What are they doing? That's like that France, the best team in the world, just like can't stop. I initially, so Angel Di Maria, relatively early on in the game, gets a penalty. Ousmane Dembele, who's a French winger, clipped him a little bit. I like, on first viewing, I didn't think it was a foul. But then Messi steps up, and at this point, I'm just like incredibly nervous because I am a frequent listener to shows like the Tifo Football Podcast and the Athletic Football Podcast, and I'm just like very much in the soccer conversation internet spheres and know exactly, like, if Messi misses this pin, and this would happen again later, like, I probably can't get on Twitter for like a week just because it's going to be all, and we're just like a few days removed from a similar thing happening to Harry Kane. I was just like, I don't want to experience that, but then he absolutely nailed it. Sent Hugo Lloris, my sweet French prince. Hugo Lloris is the captain and goalkeeper for my favorite club team, Tottenham. And then let's see, they scored again. How did they score again? It was the nice goal. It was the one that broke the internet. Like 4 passes. It always hoping, like, because I want something to happen in these kind of games, because they're pretty much just all-star teams. Like, they're not the same level of tactical complexity as like a really good club team would be. And because of that, the goals are either like certified bangers or they're really just gross and scrappy, and something you'd see on like an 8-year-old field, which we got a little bit of that later on in the game too, with Messi's second goal. But no, that second Argentine goal was hot stuff. That was, they again, like 4 or 5 passes from all the way in Argentina's zone, like defending third, all the way to the goal. That was incredible. So we're cruising along at that point. Halftime, everybody's like, oh my God, what's wrong with France? And then we get to the 75th, 80th minute. Oh, also France make 2 subs right before halftime, which was like, oh gosh, this is bad. They're already like pulling their players, which turned out to be a really good choice because a couple of those players ended up being incredibly important in the latter stages of the game. But yeah, we get to, I think it's the 81st minute, and France get a penalty, which, again, definitely a pin. Like, yeah, there was another one later on in extra time that I was like, oh, that's harsh. But This was one that was absolutely like Otamendi just gets into a situation that he should absolutely not be in. Otamendi is Argentina's very old central defender. And guess what? He can't stop, France's very young attacker, fouls him. France get the pin. They score that. I say they. Kylian Mbappe scores that. He scores again a couple minutes later on an absolute banger. The speed of thought to just be like, yeah, I don't need to take a touch here. I can, jump off the ground and sort of sweep it into the side netting was absolutely incredible. I also, and this is a mental issue for me. It's like hard for me to reconcile in my own brain. I hate penalty kicks, but I also don't have any modicum of solution to fix them. Because again, I don't enjoy being like blindly critical about things. But this is a situation where I can look at penalty kicks and be like, these are terrible. I hate them. Also, I have no idea how to fix them. So the whole time through extra time, I'm like, please don't go to pins. Like that would just be not representative of how well this game has gone. And of course, Messi scores in the second period of extra time, and I'm like freaking out, thinking like, okay, they've done it. That's it. Very scruffy goal, but still counts. And then, of course, they had the handball that got France another penalty. And then penalties. The thing that there was a couple of things that happened there, and I have considered making a video about this in the past. When people miss important penalties like that is like one of the biggest catalysts for like internet abuse that exists. And even like in the pre-internet era, like just, people get like hate mail and death threats and things like that for doing that, because it's just like a rare situation in a game that's played by two teams of 11 where it's actually 1v1. And so people can sort of pin blame on people really easily. We saw that at the Euros with England, with like, Bukayo Saka and Marcus Rashford, Jadon Sancho, which I've considered making a video out in the past, which if you want me to make a video about that, you can absolutely comment that here or on a subsequent video. But I was just terribly nervous about that too, and of course that did happen. So Tchouaméni, the guy that I was just talking up, unbelievable player. Like, he's 22, plays for Real Madrid, just a spectacularly good central midfielder, and was great in this game up to that point. And he just missed. Like, I don't know if it was because I think Martinez dove the right way, so it may have been a situation where he, saw that the keeper was going the way he wanted to put it, and just messed up. Or he may have just messed up. That happens, even to the best athletes in the world. Like your brain tells your body to do something, and because you're busy filtering out distractions, which you would be in a situation like a stadium full of people at the World Cup final, and you blow it. This is a technical term. You choke. This is actually choking is sort of, it sounds very like sports talky, but it's actually like an academic word now, because there's been a lot of research done on like why choking happens, why people who are really good at certain sports play badly at certain sports in specific situations. And this would be one of those times that you have somebody who is like objectively by pretty much every statistical measure an awesome player, and just had a rush of blood to the head and blew a big chance. And I was terrified that the same thing was going to happen to Messi, who thankfully made his first kick. And then we get to the end, and Emi Martinez makes a save. So France have missed a couple of theirs, and so all Argentina have to do on their last kick is make it. And so I always prefer games like that to end on something happening instead of something not happening. So like somebody scoring instead of somebody missing. And I was very pleased that it was Gonzalo Montiel who a few minutes before that, I say a few minutes, this is like half an hour before that, he was the guy who gave up the penalty kick to France for Mbappe to score. He had his arm up in what they would have deemed an unnatural position. It was harsh because he was pretty much like point blank. He was not very far away from the person shooting, which I think was Mbappe. I can't remember at all. So I mean, like we're talking like maybe be 10 yards. And just, ball coming at you 70 miles an hour. There's not a whole lot you can do about that. But it still gets blown for a penalty. And that was at the stage in the game where if Argentina had just held on, then they would have won in extra time instead of it having to go to penalties. So like you're opening yourself up for that kind of ridicule. And so I was very glad to see him redeem himself. That was awesome. Yeah, World Cup, honestly, one of the most emotional sporting events I've ever witnessed. And like that's pretty much every time. Like it just kind of brings that out in people. If you haven't seen this yet, I would highly encourage you to go and look at Andres Cantor, his reaction to it. So Andres Cantor is an Argentinian broadcaster. He commentates on a lot of games in Spanish. He did, I think, pretty much this whole World Cup. That's a very famous goal call, if you've ever heard that before. But he is, like I said, born in Argentina. And he's a professional. He's doing his best to be objective, but this is also like the country of his birth, winning the biggest sporting event on the planet. And so my guy broke down a little bit, and he's just like crying. he's calling this game on international television and just like weeping. It's just like goes to show how emotional people get about this particular event and how much they invest in it, even when they're trying to be objective. Like it's kind of impossible to. And even me, as a white person from America who technically doesn't have any like familial connections to Argentina, I was absolutely rooting for them today, and I definitely got a little emotional when saw Messi also getting emotional, like running around the field with his teammates, hugging everybody. That was awesome. But yeah. That wasn't in relation to a question. I just had to like process all of my World Cup feelings because again, this was like 2 or 3 weeks in the making, building up to this point. And I've already made a World Cup video, so I'm not gonna do another one, and I've already done a Messi video, so I've already kind of ruined that. That would have been fun, but I promise there will be plenty of Messi World Cup content in the next years. So if that's what you're about, you can definitely find that if you're looking for it. But transitioning now, this will be the last thing we talk about. I did want to talk about stuff that I am actually going to produce videos about. So we're coming into the end of 2022, which was the first year of Student in the Game, which has gone just absolutely splendidly, and I couldn't be happier with the community that I have with me, making videos and interacting with, I don't know, weekly, monthly basis. It's just absolutely awesome. I am going to be putting out a sort of, it's not really Christmas themed. I think I may put out like a trailer for it, like either on the channel or on Twitter or somewhere, because it's like one of the most, if not the most time-consuming video I've done so far, and you'll see why once it comes out. And that should be like Thursday-ish, but that will be the last video of this calendar year, because I think that would be that's the 22nd of December, and then we're going out of town the first part of January. So I think we'll probably be next video after that will be like a couple of weeks into January, I would think, which is actually it's about when the first video I made, the Antonio Brown video, came out a year ago. So yeah, some nice symmetry there. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I had for y'all. I'm gonna do Patreon drive before the end of the year too, just to try and push people that direction as well. And yeah, just I'm glad to have gotten to share this space with everybody. It felt oddly similar to I taught a class over Zoom in the spring, and I had 20, 30 kids listening to my lectures, and it's kind of what this felt like, but a more interactive way, because as much as I love those kids, they pretty much all had their computer screens off, so it's just me talking to a blank computer, which was fine. I enjoyed that as much as I've taught any other class, but no, this was better than that. Okay, if nobody has any more questions before we bounce up out of here, I just want to say that you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for just investing in me, investing in the channel, taking time out of your busy Sunday evening to spend some time with us. And this whole thing will be recorded and posted on the channel pretty much as soon as it's over, which is going to be right now. Thanks, guys, for coming. Again, a new video will post Thursday. Super looking forward to it. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. But until then, bye.